Righto, ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats. We're going to open with item 8, Recovery Coordination Office Update. Welcome Phil Wilson, Matt Tucker and Mace Ward to the stand. Phil, would you like to open this, please?
Yeah, guilty, Your Honour. Yeah.
Trial.
Kia ora, councillors, Mayor. Probably not fair to throw Matt under the bus 24 hours in terms of fronting this, so I'll lead us out on this item and Mace, and we have a number of other people here to assist in terms of some of the details sitting in behind the recovery report if needed. I'll try and keep this fairly high level and straightforward. We have a nice, clear interim recovery plan that we're working to now. There is a formal recovery plan for the longer term underway now. I use the word formal because it's important you understand that this is a statutory requirement. Having been in a declared emergency state, we need to go out to the community and finalise that sort of longer term view of the recovery activities that form our overall effort over the next period of time. Just a few themes that I'll bring your attention to. Clearly, and I think I said this last month in the update, clearly we're through the easier to deal with aspects of this. Not a lot has been easy to deal with, but rehabilitation of the roading network, the things that we could get on and do in the short term are largely done now. You'll see a summary in the report, for example, in the Auckland transport space that bears that out. But there is a need for an integrated sort of remediation infrastructure plan. The team's actually been meeting this morning around that, bringing it together. That's a current focus, and it's important that we're in a position shortly to come to you with that integrated program so that you understand the full cost profile across the transport, the water care, the healthy waters dimensions and so on, and to give an ability to prioritise the important recovery activities in that space. Second thing I'll mention is the need for certain of our communities that have been badly affected on the West Coast. There are plans around the removal of cordons, and that is being socialised with those communities currently. Quite an important step that we're about to come to, and I know that's on the mind of a number of councillors, and happy to address any questions in that regard. There are a number of longer term issues becoming very clear that pardon me, that go to building resilience and dealing with some of the high risk areas, be they in floodplains or in terms of landslip risk. Now, this is the subject of a workshop with you on Monday, so I'd probably encourage that we save the deep dive into that space till Monday when we can go through it with you. Suffice to say, and trying not to get ahead of ourselves here, but you're aware that we have some acutely at-risk properties around the region, and we have a need for some central government leadership in terms of a framework for dealing with some of those managed retreat issues that come out of this. So this is highly sensitive territory, and it's important we understand where central government is at with its policy framework and the funding thereof. So we're going to talk with you on Monday about that. Just finally, two things. Clearly, there's a lot of sensitivity in the community, a lot of affected people, and therefore a lot of demand from us for tailored communications updates, if you like, in terms of how we're tracking, what their scenarios look like. We've been stepping up significantly in that area. I think we're in a much improved space, but I'm also aware that we're not meeting all needs yet, and we're still gearing up in the recovery function to be able to address some of that communications demand. And just very finally, and you'll see some figures in the report today that that indicate a reduced number of red stickered and yellow stickered properties. That's an indication of a significant volume of work that's happened in terms of reassessment of impacted properties. So we're getting really clear now about you know, that profile of damage to properties and what their different scenarios look like in terms of an ability to rebuild and deal with the damage. Part of that relates to the geotechnical, landslip risk, etc. That's proving, and we have Ross Roberts online to address any questions in that space that you might have. That is a process that's very technical and takes quite a bit of time and is therefore quite upsetting for people whose properties are affected by landslip risk. There's a program in place. We have supply arrangements in place in terms of geotechnical support from third-party vendors. So it's tracking well, but it takes quite a while. I'll just make mention of that. Look, the very final point I will make is that we're very aware that you will have constituents who have quite specific views, needs, issues that will be coming to you. I just make the offer that the recovery function is there to assist you. We're really happy to deal with those offline. Please reach out to us if you've got those constituent queries coming through, and we'll make sure that they get addressed for yours and their benefit. Thank you, Your Worship. I'll quickly hand to, I think, Mace to fill in any gaps.
Thanks for that, and also thanks for stepping up to the role, Phil. I think you've done a really good job. I'm sure I'd be delighted to pass the ball to Matt.
Kia ora, Your Worship and members. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Just to firstly acknowledge the impact on communities and particularly individuals who've really suffered during this time of the two recent extreme weather events we've had. And just also a thanks to you as elected members and others who have been able to support those communities and support us in our work as well. We really appreciate that. The focus, we've been in an establishment phase for the Recovery Office, and the focus has largely been a tail end in this transition phase of response and a focus on repair. And as Mr. Wilson mentioned, the future is all about how we actually build back that infrastructure that's required for communities, and that includes community infrastructure as well and community well-being, and engage people in that, acknowledging that there is funding issues to be resolved, and as Phil mentioned, central government policy. And the discussion this morning, in fact, around with other infrastructure partners was in terms of building back resilience, what are the design standards? And I note Councillor Darby's questions around that. So just to give you some assurance, we have stood up the office, and now with Matt in place, we are making real progress at getting towards continuing to support communities, but also getting towards going out with a recovery plan and engaging with communities around priorities, and particularly how we focus any recovery work, not only in communities themselves, but any physical works, so that we do that in an intelligent and coordinated way with partners across central government and across the Auckland Council group and the private sector as well. I think it's been a real feature of setting up the office is, and I heard Councillor Turner use this term yesterday, but an agile approach of partnership for central government agencies and private sector and across the council family. But we're happy to answer any questions, Your Worship, and note that in the future we'll bring you a dashboard of progress around the key initiatives across the 4 key work streams that we've outlined. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Predictably, I've got questions from the west and the south. Councillor Turner.
Thanks. Just you talked about red and yellow stickers both going down. So has red dropped to yellow and more yellows dropped, and what about white? You know, I just wanted to see if are they dropping down or dropping out?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Turner. I think it's certainly the summaries outlined on paragraph 32. So there's a mixture. Some of the reds have gone to yellows, and some of the yellows have gone to whites, and the whites, as the remediation occurs, they drop out. So.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. That's what I was wondering too, because it means you'll ultimately have a lot of whites and no reds if it's a cascade, which I accept it is. With the yellows, they're generally that to remove to white requires an electrician to examine because the level of water's got up into the electrical system. Is there a shortage of electrical suppliers to do that?
I'm not aware of any constraints around people getting those contractors and supply. We have seen some constraints, although the insurance industry has stepped up significantly in getting assessors out to properties, so property owners can get those works completed. But we're not hearing that. But
Councillor Henderson, please.
Thank you, and forgive me, colleagues, for the ward-specific question, but we're getting a lot of feedback around Piha and the closure of the roads. Could I ask if there's any update on when Piha will be open for the public?
Kia ora, Councillor Henderson. We're very aware of the constraints that's been putting on particularly small businesses, but people returning to their normal lives and reconnecting with each other. So the key reasons, perhaps if I can answer the question, Piha has been closed. It's been around the number of slips and severe damage on the road itself, and keeping that criticality of that lifeline for Piha residents open, given the singular nature of that particular road, and the public safety risks associated with dangerous buildings and slips and landslips and community distress and wellbeing. We will provide elected members with an update today about opening back up that road. We have an assurance from Auckland Transport and geotechnical engineers that can occur in the near future, subject to some triggers in the case of heavy rainfall or other land movement that can then be managed through a traffic management system. But we recognise that it's really critical for communities to get back to normal. So.
Thanks. We look forward to that advice. And just while I've got you, because I won't speak on it, but thank you as well for appointing someone particular to Piha and Karikari. I think that was a really good move and really helpful for that community. Thanks.
Yeah, good question. There's been, both those communities are somewhat divided between the ones who didn't want people in for security and the other ones who wanted their businesses to survive. I think we negotiated that tricky business as well as you could have, and thanks for your involvement there as well, councillors. Councillor Dalton, Furley, Ferry, Fletcher, Sayers and Filipina.
Thank you. Thank you, and welcome, Matt. Councillor Henderson just said that you'd appointed somebody specifically for the Piha area, and I wondered about that because you've got so many different responses to provide to so many different things that are happening. So for people who are still left with all this uncertainty, where you've got smaller gaps, or not gaps, where you've got smaller groups of houses that are affected, are they being worked with one-on-one with somebody? And the example I'm going to give you is Hakanoa, Dryden Street, Depression. There's about 6 houses in there that needs a different response. They're asking for managed retreat. I want to know if there is somebody specifically working with those families in that area. And I guess the follow-up question to that is, are you well enough resourced to enable this to happen? Because these people are going through some pretty dreadful times right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dalton, through your worship. We're very aware of that location in particular and the significant impacts have been in that community. But when we do have case managers from our building compliance team working specifically with those the homeowners in that location, and on Monday I think we'll be in the workshop be able to outline that as a particular location where there are some options. But in answer to your final part of your question, are we well enough resourced? We have good resources at present, but we recognise the need for community support for navigators to help property owners find their way through, and so they get the resolution they require. But
Does the skill in the navigators exist within our organisation, or is that something that we would go somewhere else for? Because it is that wraparound voice and direction that the residents are really, they must be just exhausted as well as traumatised from what they've been through, and you've run out of the energy to keep going.
so it's a mixture of both, but we do have some good skills within the organisation, but we will need to source out outside the organisation as well for that. We are talking to particularly MB in terms of the resources they may have to support funding navigators.
Is that something we can talk about next week as well? That would be really good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is very similar to Councillor Dalton and is ward specific like Councillor Henderson's, I guess, for the people of Māngere who were greatly affected by the floods. And I do want to thank Phil and the team for the work that went into that and supporting the people of Māngere. But I mean, even in those early days when we were at the evac centre, we recognised that it would be the medium to long-term support that would be a much bigger issue, especially in areas like Māngere, areas that are already, highly deprived, where our families are already struggling with everything else that life throws at them. So in the similar vein, what are we doing as an organisation to reach those communities? Because we know that those are the communities also, they are the ones perhaps most vulnerable, perhaps most in need, but also least likely to engage with us, with council. And so it's really crucial that the navigators or the strategies that you engage in order to reach those communities will be effective. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor Foley. Yeah, certainly to acknowledge the work that was done at Moana and Nui Kiwa are really significant in terms of the number of people that went through that centre and sought support. Certainly just to also acknowledge that, for example, the MSD civil defence payments were very skewed towards Pasifika and Māori, so 40% of those payments of 26 million went to Māori and 38% to Pasifika communities. In terms of Māngere in particular, we recognise that's an area that needs particular attention. I think you'll see again on Monday some potential options. But in terms of supporting those communities, in particular, we're seeking the support of Kāinga Ora, who are typically the property owner and the Crown tenancy agency in those areas, and acknowledging, though alongside that, there needs to be support. So it's certainly not forgotten, and it's been identified as a priority community given the number of families and residents impacted.
Kia ora, thank you, and I guess we'll continue that conversation on Monday. Kia ora. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you for that. Councillor Ferry, please.
Thank you, and my thanks to the team and welcome to Matt, and interested to see how you get on with us from your past experience. the key question I wanted to ask about is, I've sort of struggled to find the right word for it. I've sort of mentioned it to a few people around the table before, but some kind of reconciliation type process, because acknowledging what my colleagues have said before, we've got a lot of people here who've been through a lot of trauma. A lot of them are really angry at council in particular. And for some of them, for them to get past that, they need a process by which they can tell their story, be heard, and know that they've been heard, and also that we as an organisation can glean some of the ideas for future response from as well. So sort of looking at the structure of the recovery unit, it probably falls in that sort of comms and engagement space, but it has a really important interface with us as the political leaders and also our local boards, because that's who people, I don't want to have a comms person out there having to be yelled at. And I think most of us around the table have probably had that experience of people caring loudly in our direction, whether it was over this or something else. So is there any thinking in that space yet? And it might have some connection with the MB Navigators, not sure, but yeah, just interested in your thinking in that space and how that might get picked up in the recovery unit work, because I think it's really important that we do it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Ferry. There is some thought, certainly an intention around that, and some work that's already been occurring in the community and social wellbeing work stream. So my colleague Linda Greenloch is managing that and is very connecting into those communities and identifying what the best strategy is. We, as part of the recovery planning work, we will be surveying people and really understanding individual needs and how we can support that. So it is a work in progress. I acknowledge that, and we acknowledge the suffering that's occurred in some of those communities. So I appreciate the question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferry. Councillor Fletcher, please.
Oh, thank you. Some of my questions can be held over to the workshop that we will have on Monday, so thank you for that opportunity and welcome, Matt. I just wonder whether you can give us any guidance, Phil, on what reports you're getting of properties that were impacted by the floods and the cyclone, but where the landowners, fearful of that information appearing on their limb, are not following through and that we don't have visibility of.
Through your worship, I'm not sure I can comment too much. We're aware of that scenario, and actually it's reasonably apparent from looking at the discrepancy between our rapid building assessment data and the number of insurance claims that there is definitely a gap there, and some of that will be related to the scenario you're talking about. People not wanting to have stuff translated onto a limb, but exactly the number of instances of that and how we deal with it, I can't answer at this stage.
Perhaps just your awareness of this possibility, and maybe that's something that we can talk about more informally.
Yeah, I think we should give you an update, and we'll put that on the work program around the management of how things are recorded on limbs in which instance. I know there's a lot of sensitivity in the community around this, and we've got to strike that balance between being really justified in putting things on limbs, but making sure we do so as a moral responsibility to future owners. So a lot of sensitivity, and I think we might summarise that for you offline.
Good point, though. I'm sure Matt's got experience in that from Christchurch. Councillor Sayers, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Mace. I've probably got 3 questions, and one might be more directed towards you, Matt, for the third one, just for some thoughts there. But I'm really asking these questions just within context, because I know that a number of people from the Muriwai community have dialed in just because they knew this is on the agenda item. They've contacted me. And I think, to put it in a nutshell, there's probably 2 things. Just picking up on Shane's and other councillors' questions around their localised communities. So in terms of Muriwai and the cordons there, Mace, if you're able to perhaps just summarise where that's sitting, just so people can get a snapshot of that today. And also perhaps picking up on some of the other comments, like from Councillor Ferry, we know that that community went through quite a lot of hurt and it turned into a bit of anger, really, and we had to cope with that. So are you able to perhaps comment for the record how you might see, if that event happened again, if we had a repeat or another storm coming through and we had similar damage in that community, what we see our response might be different compared to what and our learnings and what people might see different on the ground, Mace? Yeah?
Perhaps I'll answer the question. So the current state of the cordons, through you, Worship, Councillor, says that we still have an outer cordon in Muriwai and two inner cordons, one around Motatara Road and one around Domain Crescent, where the greatest impacts have been felt. Motatara Road is being cleared now, and we expect that by Auckland Transport another 2 weeks for that clearance to occur, and that will restore the main entry into Muriwai from a roading perspective. The inner cordon around Domain Crescent will remain and certainly remain in place for quite some time until we complete that geotechnical assessment to really determine the future and how any remediation can occur and what can occur there, and that's in a program of, it's got 2 to 5 months to run. We're 1 month into that program of work, and we are sending out a newsletter later this week, either today or tomorrow, about that work and describing what's happening, including from Ross Roberts, who's online, Head of Engineering Resilience, to really explain that to the community. The other constraint at Muriwai, and one of the reasons that cordon's in place, as opposed to entry into Muriwai, and the safety constraints for future slips, is one of water supply. So Watercare are working as hard as they can on that supply. So the tankers are providing that supply injected into the system. There are a number of households on tank supply relieving that. But if we were to open it up and people return to the park can often use 2/3 of the available water supply in any one day, and that would mean that residents would run out at the moment. So it is a sanitary problem and just a basic needs issue at the moment. We'll have an update on that in the future. So we can see those cordons reducing and becoming more focused, but we need to reduce those constraints. What would we do differently, and what have we learnt? I think we've certainly learnt a lot, Councillor says, and the ability to inject, or the need to inject people into communities more quickly and communicate, and work alongside other agencies is really, really critical. We've been careful not to overpromise, but deliver or over-deliver where we can. But we understand the delays are really distressing to the community, and that's important that we're open, honest and transparent about what we're doing. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Mace, for your reply there. My third question, through you, through the chair, Matt, I don't know if you're in a position to perhaps give some general comment about this from your experience, reading the report and just getting your feet under the table. But I guess if I could couch it this way to you, we've got a large rural sector of Auckland, and we have a large, concentrated urban section of Auckland, and I guess I wonder if there's a different response if you're thinking about, are there different responses between what you have to set up for an urban environment compared to a rural environment? And I'll just, to help paint some context there, back in perhaps pre the super city, and it was very decentralised models we used. They each had their own council for starters, so it was obviously more decentralised than now. But they called them civil defence units, their community groups, they had some resources. They had cans of diesel and they had radios and they could kind of communicate with each other. That all got changed under the Super City model and become much more centralised, Matt. And now they don't have the cans of diesel. Those communities don't have the radios, you know. And I guess they want to be able to express, perhaps like Councillor Ferry expressed, their learnings and perhaps get that off their chest, because there's those. I can't comment about the urban environment, but the rural environment, they're very self-reliant. So they tend to be organised anyway, and they've got their neighbourhood support groups and different things will come together and act in a way and telephone trees, and they kind of helped each other out as best they could, and they were isolated. So are you in a position to give some general comment now about how you might see that centralised model compared to perhaps a more decentralised and localised model, and if there's any difference between the urban modelling there compared to the rural in your own mind at this early stage?
Councillor, happy to give you my view 24 hours in more broadly, but I might just defer to Phil to answer your question more specifically, but then, yeah, happy to pick up and give you my view of the world.
My reflection, Councillor Sayers, is that some of what you're addressing is more the response rather than recovery area. There was a recommendation in the Bush Review, and there is now a very clear set of actions in our work program arising from that. You are quite correct in your assessment, and we've heard that quite loudly from a number of local boards and local communities in terms of the need to work more closely with them to develop a level of response planning that's localised and to support that happening. So that is one of the reasonably fundamental changes in direction for emergency management over the next while, and we're going to have to resource to do that, obviously, but I can confirm that that's the direction I've given to emergency management and is captured in their work program.
Hey, Alf, are you there? Councillor Phil?
Affirmative,
Oh, good.
Your Worship, and my apologies for not being there personally. I just spent an hour and a bit in a dentist's chair and he didn't like me, so my humble apologies. Tēnā koutou to the staff that's there, and welcome aboard, Matt. To you, Mace, you mentioned kāinga ora. I was disturbed to hear a comment from a kāinga ora representative, I think it was last night, saying that they're going to build houses in places where obviously they will have to build for the community, but as a result of the homes that kāinga ora have built across Tāmaki Makaurau, can you tell me what input, what relationship do you have in regards to any consultation with kāinga ora, please?
Kia ora, Your Worship. Kia ora, Councillor Filipaina. Good to see you, and sorry to hear that you've had to have some suffering. I'm sure it'll pay off. In terms of kāinga ora, we are reaching out directly to kāinga ora, and particularly through Healthy Waters. I'm very aware of the location in Māngere and also across other parts of Tāmaki Makaurau. Grey Lynn, for example, is another location. And those direct conversations are occurring in various ways through business as usual, through our development project office, so John Dunshay's area in terms of future development. But you raised the question about what is the appetite for risk, where there's been high impact and there remains high risk. That is a quite live discussion with the community and with other infrastructure providers, including homes, housing, tenancy, the Crown's tenancy agency, to really understand from the community through the recovery plan consultation, what is the appetite for that sort of risk and resilience where homes are being flooded frequently and displacing families, and the social fabric is really being impacted and people are distressed. So there is, to give you an assurance, we are working directly with Kāinga Ora and others. So I appreciate the question.
Kia ora, Your Worship, just one more pātai and then. In regards to moving forward, does your team have contact with families who are still suffering in regards to whiteware, bedrooms, beds, etc.? Do you still have, your staff have contact around those people, community?
Your Worship, yes. So Linda Greenwald's team, in terms of community and social wellbeing, there is direct contact with people, and we have MSD within the recovery office who are also through their not civil defence payments but other support. That connection is there, as well as with an accommodation hub for people who are actually displaced from their homes as well. But those basic needs of whiteware, linen, back into MSD, and also, as you're well aware, the generosity of philanthropic providers and social networks that are out there as well, supporting people.
Yeah, Mace, can you get Linda to? I'll contact Linda because there's some whiteware and new stuff available. Also, Matt, again, welcome. We look forward to working with you. And please let us know if we can help. As a result, we ended up feeding 22,500 children and their families at our centre. So please give us a call. Kia ora, thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Alf. And I think you're right. The interview last night from Kāinga Ora did have some troubling statements. Last, and definitely not least, Councillor Henderson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I note some comments in the report around working with Māori. Could I just get, if there's any more detail on what that looks like on the ground, I think that'd be really useful. Do you have any kind of comment to make on how you're going to move forward there?
Yes, I can catch up with you separately, but certainly we have had, where particular iwi have stepped forward, we have been able to help out. So, for example, Te Karoamaki, where there have been significant land movement and perhaps where there's been cultural heritage sites impacted, but also more generally across, we've met with the iwi chairs in their relationship with Auckland Council, and we intend to have an opportunity for Māori to participate, Mātāwaka and iwi, so Māori generally, to participate in what recovery looks like and what the opportunities to build resilience are for housing and homes, and whilst it gets into the response space, how marae can be used in any emergency.
Thank you, that's great, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, that brings the end of those. We've got a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that we received this. Anybody? Councillor Sayers and the Deputy Mayor. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you very much for your presentation. Good luck, Matt. We'll move to the item 9, investment in Drury. I welcome Michael Burns and Andrew Duncan to the chair. Thank you very much for this